Spring break unfolds across Florida's sun-drenched beaches like a layered cinematic experience. Bright skies, crashing surf, eager college students racing toward freedom, and behind them a quiet network of police units who dedicate entire weeks to preventing disaster. To the casual visitor, the beach is an arena of games, music, and playful indulgence. To officers, it is a dynamic risk environment where underage drinking, strong currents, homemade alcohol, crowded bars, rental boats, transient tourists, and predatory behavior converge into a single seasonal pressure point. Their routine, while repetitive, demands unwavering vigilance. The day begins calmly. Officers patrol in small vehicles, weaving between umbrellas while greeting clusters of students. Their tone is professional, even friendly. The intent is not intimidation, but compliance. The first group encountered claims to be enjoying harmless drinks, twisted tea cans, seltzers, red cups. IDs emerge from wallets and phone apps. Birth years are cross-checked. One 19-year-old attempts to deny he held the beverage. Officers point out the obvious possession is possession, especially when everyone is on camera. The group laughs nervously and pours their drinks into warm sand. Fines hover around $300, expensive reminders. Officers explain the process: only one citation may be issued. Repeat offenses escalate into mandatory arrests. By midday, more crowds pack the shoreline. Music pulses from portable speakers, volleyball games spill across the sand, and spikeball tournaments draw spectators. Officers ask participants about their ages and warn younger students not to carry cups. The tension between carefree joy and strict enforcement becomes visible. Students learn that proximity to alcohol creates legal vulnerability. Cups left beside beach chairs, mysterious clear liquids, and shadowy coolers are all suspect. For every student educated another remains naive, believing cleverness can outsmart the law. Officers encounter a man dragging a large cooler behind him, strapped to a rolling dolly. He hands out printed menus advertising mixed cocktails at $10 each. His business thrives quietly among tipsy enthusiasts who see it as convenient, harmless. When confronted, he admits he saw similar operations in Miami and assumed legality translated across geography. Officers explain that alcohol sales require permits everywhere. His drinks, unlabeled and homemade, are potentially dangerous. What if ingredients are contaminated? What if the alcohol content is uncontrolled? The cooler's inventory is seized. The man receives a court notice and learns failure to appear results in a warrant. His expression reveals sudden comprehension: profit weighed unfairly against risk. He appears genuinely young, perhaps trying to hustle income beyond his day job and amateur boxing career. Officers advise him to leave commerce behind. Spring break is not an unregulated marketplace. As afternoon shadows grow longer, officers investigate a young woman holding a cloudy beverage. Yesterday, she received a citation. Today, she insists the cup contains water and that leftover residue explains the opacity. Officers remain skeptical. The scent, color, and container raise suspicion. When she pleads, emotions run raw. She cites financial strain, panic over a broken phone, and exhaustion from travel. She argues the kitchen where she stays is too small to wash cups. The law, however, ignores inconvenience. Detention follows, protocols activate, and transportation to booking becomes inevitable. Students around her murmur anxiously. They absorb the practical lesson: repeated disobedience does not return sympathy. It hardens procedure. Away from the sand and closer to the waterline, two tourists sit precariously on a pool float drifting toward a treacherous current. They wave playfully, at first unaware of the danger lurking beneath. Officers maneuver a boat into position. The women admit they are from inland states, unfamiliar with currents and maritime rules. They had considered renting a pontoon, but the price felt steep. The pool float, cheerful and cheap, almost pulled them toward disaster. Officers tow them back, gently advising them that drowning incidents spike during spring break. The raft, bright and inflatable, belongs near chlorine, not saltwater. The women thank them repeatedly, visibly shaken by the realization of how close they came to being swept away. Throughout the day, educational outreach becomes an equally vital mission. Reports of drugging in crowded bars, especially those popular among young women, have increased over recent years. Officers distribute small kits capable of detecting common sedative agents when a drop of drink is placed on them. Tourists from New York listen intently, nodding, promising to stay vigilant. They receive koozies' bright neoprene sleeves meant to insulate bottles, but also serve as visible reminders of caution. The message resonates: danger can hide inside a glass, not just in open water. Simultaneously, a handler and his canine partner patrol the beach. The dog trained explosive detection unit practices by identifying intentionally planted scents. Students watch in awe as she freezes, sits, focuses on the object. Her handler explains behavioral cues: change of breathing, posture, tail stillness. When she receives her toy reward, she becomes joyful, playful, yet always ready to return to work. The handler admits he misses her when on vacation, a reminder that for some officers, companionship with their canine partner transcends routine employment. Students gather to pet her, their faces showing excitement and relief. For a moment, enforcement becomes community bonding. As the sun rises higher, officers witness creative athletic displays, cheer stunts, dance routines, acrobatics performed for attention and laughter. One group asks an officer to be a judge. He participates, happily counting attempts and encouraging improvement. Their joyful failures bring comedic relief, and the final successful stunt earns applause and a perfect score. These moments reinforce that policing does not always require confrontation. Sometimes presence alone prevents escalation. But soon after, an underage male dancing vigorously with a drink draws attention. His balance wavers, his speech slurs. He hands over his identification without protest, and his penalty reaches over $300. His friends plead for mercy, citing birthdays and group seniority. The officer repeats instructions. Every violator receives a citation, no exceptions. Surprisingly, the young man accepts responsibility with grace, poses for pictures, and laughs with the officer. He becomes an example of cooperative enforcement, demonstrating how attitude can shape experience. Later, Marine units identify growing boat traffic near channels with strong outgoing currents. Many operators are rental customers unfamiliar with maritime rules. Officers respond to potential collisions, helping guide inexperienced captains away from hazards. They remind them that navigation requires constant attention. Alcohol and irresponsible boating form tragic combinations. They speak of previous seasons when inexperienced riders drifted too far and never returned alive. Their warnings, though serious, aim to prevent history from repeating. Throughout the afternoon, constant repetition tests officers' stamina. Each conversation repeats themes: pour out the drink, do not lie, possession, proximity matters, citations are non-negotiable. Their voices remain calm, even as sunburn reddens their arms and utility belts dig into hips. They answer questions clearly, mental maps of legal statutes embedded into muscle memory. When asked whether liquids in opaque cups are detectable, officers smile, knowingly scent, confirming more than eyes. Behind each enforcement decision lies an invisible thread connecting tourism, economics, public perception, municipal liability, and safety. Florida's coastal communities depend heavily on seasonal influxes of students. One high-profile death can damage reputations and revenue streams. Local workers, from servers to bartenders to boat rental operators, rely on orderly crowds to secure income. Officers shoulder the moral burden of preventing preventable tragedy. As afternoon transitions toward early evening, officers regroup on sand, exchanging notes about suspicious individuals, confiscated contraband, and enforcement hotspots likely to intensify at night. They mention the difficulty of combating homemade alcohol mixtures not regulated, not inspected. One contaminated batch could sicken dozens. A single bottle laced with the wrong substance could alter the trajectory of an entire group's vacation. Prevention in this context protects far more than individual names on citations. When the sun casts longer shadows toward condos, students begin migrating away from the beach. Portable speakers quiet volleyball games end, and towels are folded. Officers guide foot traffic across busy highways, reminding visitors that intoxicated pedestrians are unpredictable hazards. They prepare mentally for the nightlife shift where illumination dims and dangers multiply. Their patrol continues, though now the environment changes. Instead of sand, they face neon lights, bass-heavy bars, and crowded sidewalks. For officers, spring break feels cyclical. Each day mirrors the last, endless identification checks, repeated education, and constant reminders never to leave drinks unattended. Yet small victories matter. A prevented drowning, a confiscated cooler, a student educated. These intangible successes rarely earn recognition, but they illuminate the fundamental truth that policing spring break is more about prevention than punishment. Relief comes not from citations issued, but from fatalities avoided. As evening approaches, the demeanor of crowds shifts subtly. The sun's heat begins to ease, replaced by a faint ocean breeze. Students emerge from vacation rentals, freshly showered, dressed in neon shirts or glittering tops, ready to visit local bars and nightclubs. Officers reposition themselves along major pedestrian pathways, aware that early evening is when irresponsible decisions incubate. Alcohol consumed earlier may only now reach full-intensity clouding judgment just as new drinks are poured. The transition from daylight to nightlife introduces new patterns. Taxis crowd the streets, ride-sharing vehicles pull abruptly to curbs, and foot traffic risks sudden interaction with traffic lanes. Officers stationed near boardwalk entrances hand out verbal reminders to keep drinks inside establishments, not on sidewalks. They emphasize that controlled environments reduce risk. Even though their voices remain friendly, fatigue begins to weigh on their posture. Hours beneath unrelenting sun have soaked through uniforms, leaving salt crystallizing on their collars. Yet the officers persist, knowing that their presence alone dissuades dangerous behavior. One officer comments to a partner that spring break patrol condenses an entire year's worth of enforcement scenarios into a few intense weeks. Meanwhile, Marine officers adjust duties as boat rentals surge towards sunset. Visitors unfamiliar with maritime rules face hidden currents, shallow sandbars, and congested channels. The water becomes a mosaic of pontoons, jet skis, and inflatables. Officers shout clear directives through megaphones, maintain speed limits, wear life jackets, avoid restricted zones. Some visitors wave lazily, unaware that within minutes, currents could drag them toward open water out of sight. Patrol boats monitor, silently scanning horizons for signs of struggle. It is often the faintest flailing gesture that signals drowning, the quiet vertical desperation known only to trained eyes. Back on shore, officers encounter conversations that follow predictable patterns. A student insists the beverage is non-alcoholic. Another claims the cup belongs to someone else. A third laughs nervously while burying a can partially under sand. Officers recite statutes calmly, often reminding students that honesty can mitigate consequences. Occasionally, students test boundaries with sarcasm or flippant remarks. Yet officers rarely escalate. They rely on professional composure, knowing tempers spike when intoxication mixes with confrontation. Among the crowd, cultural contrasts appear. Some students treat citations as humorous souvenirs, laughing as fines stretch hundreds of dollars. Others view them as catastrophic financial burdens. Officers witness these emotional cross-sections, privilege and panic colliding in real time. They understand that enforcement affects individuals differently. Still, the law is impartial. A citation remains a citation whether the offender shrugs or cries. Later into the evening, officers receive a call about suspicious behavior near the waterline, two individuals attempting to hoist their raft back into the surf. Upon arrival, officers recognize them as the same pair rescued earlier. Laughter drapes their speech as they insist just one more try. Officers speak firmly this time. Repetition transforms a warning into negligence. They confiscate the raft, placing it into evidence for destruction. The women apologize, sobering briefly when confronted with frustration. Officers hope embarrassment substitutes adequately for tragedy. As the tide rises, officers observe that younger-looking groups cluster around older individuals who supply them with drinks. High school seniors recently graduated but not yet legal attempt to blend into college crowds. Officers approach gently, mindful of developmental fragility. They remind them that underage drinking can escalate toward predatory targeting, sexual vulnerability, and medical emergencies. Many listen respectfully. Some roll their eyes. Regardless, officers emphasize that prevention today avoids trauma tomorrow. One of the most subtle hazards emerges in crowded bars: drink abandonment. Students often place cups on ledges, dance floors, speaker tops, or restroom counters. Officers repeatedly remind groups to keep drinks in hand as predatory actors depend on unattended beverages. The Bar Watch kits serve as a small shield, but awareness remains the primary defense. Officers share quiet stories from previous seasons, victims waking confused miles away from their original location, memories erased. The unsettling weight of reality contrasts harshly with neon lights and laughter. Night deepens and officers cycle through brief hydration breaks. They gather behind patrol vehicles discussing behavioral trends. One officer notes an increase in homemade alcohol mixtures inconsistent in potency. Another describes multiple sightings of individuals stumbling aggressively near boat docks. Patterns help strategize patrol placement. Officers rotate to hot spots, blending education and enforcement fluidly. A gentle warning delivered at the right time can prevent a medical emergency hours later. At one point, officers encounter a group attempting a physically risky stunt, a human pyramid on unstable sand. The base begins sinking and top-tier participants wobble dangerously. Officers intervene humorously, clapping in mock anticipation as they approach softening disappointment. They remind the group that spinal injuries are not souvenirs. The students sigh theatrically, but disperse grateful that enforcement came dressed as comedy rather than scolding. Elsewhere, a group of engineering students surround an officer fascinated by his gear. They ask about utility belt weight radio frequency bands and the ballistic quality of his vest. He answers enthusiastically, relieved to enjoy a conversation rooted in curiosity rather than sarcasm. One student jokes that engineering students are responsible alcoholics, prompting laughter. For a moment, officer and students find common humanity. Around midnight, medical staff notify officers of heat exhaustion cases. Students dehydrated from hours on sand collapse unexpectedly. Alcohol masks dehydration symptoms, delaying recognition. Officers escort paramedics to victims' clearing paths through dense crowds. They raise voices, gently urging hydration. They know that tomorrow some will ignore warnings again. Still, the repetition matters. Each reminder is a net cast into chaos. Late-night Marine Patrol reveals yet another hazard boat operators whose licenses do not require extensive training. Rental companies sometimes assume liability waivers absolve danger. Officers disagree. They shadow rental pontoons, discreetly steering them through narrow passages. One operator misjudges a turn and nearly collides with a jet ski. Officers activate sirens, redirecting course. The operator breathes heavily afterward, shaken by how close disaster approached. Near closing hours, officers receive a final complaint noise disturbance near a cluster of condos. They arrive to find a small party of students singing loudly. Rather than issue citations, officers simply ask them to reduce volume. The students comply, instantly apologizing profusely. Gracious enforcement often yields better results than punitive escalation. As the beach empties, officers reflect. They prevented drownings. They stopped illegal alcohol distribution. They educated countless young adults about drink safety. They cited reckless behavior, but also celebrated harmless laughter. Their day has balanced the gritty weight of confrontation against the unexpected joy of connection. Walking back toward their vehicles, officers observe abandoned cups and sand footprints fading toward parking lots and the faint echo of music drifting inland. They know that when dawn arrives, the cycle resets. More crowds, more warnings, more decisions, more tiny threads of impact. Officers speak quietly among themselves. The toughest part of spring break is not the enforcement. It's the emotional endurance required to care repeatedly, sincerely for people who may not realize how close they stood to irreversible consequences. Tomorrow, new arrivals will believe themselves invincible. Officers will greet them with the same patience, the same explanations, the same hope that this year remains free of tragedy. In this rhythm, policing becomes both repetitive and profound. It is a reminder that safety is not merely the absence of harm, but the accumulation of thousands of invisible interventions performed by the anonymous guardians in blue.